Wanna hang out? This isn't the creepiest encounter, but pretty scary at the time. Before Uber was around, I had to take a cab from the city to my mom's house, about 20 to 25 minutes away. Cab drivers are some of the creepiest people I've encountered, but this one took the cake. This happened years ago, so I may be a bit fuzzy on the details, but I'll tell you what I remember from it. So this creepy driver picked me up and told me I could sit in the front seat. I was young and naive, so I said, okay. To give you an idea of what this fella looked like, he was extremely overweight, sweaty, and had a neckbeard. He had a giant boil on his right ear, smelled like sweat and cigarettes, and was just really gross in general. He started off chatting with me about random stuff, then brought up opiates. He began listing various pills and how much he could get them for, but he gave me a discount cause I'm cute. The whole time he was talking, I didn't really respond to what he was saying, just kept saying to everything that he was saying. Meanwhile, he was swerving all around the road like he was drunk. We had to drive over a large river, and he nearly ran us off the bridge. At this point, I was really freaked out and started planning how and where I could get him to drop me off that would still be within reasonable walking distance to my mom's house. I got him to pull over, and he turned to me and said, "A few weeks ago, I was giving a cute girl a ride, and when I asked her where she was going, she said she was just bored and wanted to drive around. We hung out all day and she helped me with my paperwork. I could make this ride free if you wanted to do something like that." Seriously? I said no, paid him and hurried off. Creepy cabbie. Let's not meet again. Ictus Abominus. So, in 1998, I graduated high school and started attending college. I decided to get on campus the summer before my fall classes started in order to get a job and move out away from my small hometown, and to save money, and I moved into the on-campus dorms. Since it was summer semester, they were only opening about half of the wings and rooms in the main male dorm, so I was paired up with a roommate. He and I hit it off immediately, and I even got him a working job with me delivering furniture, a fascinating job that generated dozens of stories for another time. Our dorm rooms were very spartan, consisting of one room, 2 box bed frames with a plastic-ish mattress, and 2 standing cabinets for clothes. Dixon Hall 806 quickly became the oasis for freshmen who had, for some reason or another, decided to move on campus 3 months early. There were roughly 20 other guys in a dorm built for 300 students. Some of them were like us, but there was a very interesting hodgepodge of people. We all freely roamed around each other's rooms, borrowing between paydays, etc. It was a great atmosphere. Shortly after we got moved in, put up our sublime and notorious BIG posters, found a source of alcohol, etc., a very strange guy moved in 3 rooms down the hall. He was a short, stocky guy, receding hairline with very tangled, curly reddish-brown hair. He was really pale and apparently shaved his face but not his neck, resulting in a bizarre, coarse neckbeard of reddish-brown hair. But the strangest thing about him were his eyes. One or both of his eyes were perpetually rocking back into his head and then returning to normal, but never both his eyes at the same time. That's the only way I could describe it. The few times we passed in the hall or in the lobby, he wouldn't speak or even acknowledge anyone in passing, and all I could think was he looked like he was being electrocuted. He never spoke to anyone in passing, he rarely ever left his room, and for 3 months, nobody saw him use the restroom. We had common restrooms. He never interacted with anyone, never asked to bum a smoke, never borrowed food. He was a ghost. Being college freshmen, we were naturally intrigued and curious about his story, what his room was like, etc. Well, one day, we found out. My roommate and I were leaving our dorm room to go to work, a little hungover and running late, when my roommate stops dead in his tracks and said, "Dude, look!" As we passed his room, the door was slightly ajar, and the lights were off. I only looked into that room one time, but I'll never forget it. He had turned both box-style bed frames up on end and pushed them against the wall. There were dozens and dozens and dozens of handles arranged haphazardly on the desk surfaces. and a pallet of 2 to 3 blankets on the floor next to a wall. There were dozens or so books laying around the pallet. Above the head of the pallet on the wall were several dozen charcoal figures and portraits drawn on a cinder block wall. All of them were incredibly well done, considering the medium in which they were drawn and the rough surface of the block wall. One was of me, one was of my roommate, and the rest were straight out of a Wes Craven film. Specifically, there was a humanoid figure with the head of a ram who was cutting his own arm with a knife, starting at the elbow and cutting towards the wrist. On a similarly creepy note, my roommate pointed out that traced along the baseboards around the whole room was a single, black charcoal line. As we slowly backed out of the room, we agreed that this had not happened, and that we were never ever going to tell anyone. Again, being college freshmen, that ended up not being the case. When we came back from work, his door was still open. My roommate and I crept past his door like Elmer Fudd hunting wabbits, and promptly shut and locked our own door. A little later in the evening, we heard a door slam against the wall as if it had been flung open, and then we heard it slam shut again. We sat in silence, straining to hear anything out of his room. Sometime later, it seemed like forever, we heard an angry, aggressive kind of grunting and yell for 5 to 10 minutes. Then nothing. We considered telling the RAs, but college freshmen want little more than to never be called a snitch. A huge fan of 70s and 80s horror films, I eventually decided to nickname the guy Ictus Abominus, a crude misinterpretation from the creepy symphonic chant in Ave Santani, the theme song from the movie The Omen. We always kept an eye on his door, and would frequently rhetorically ask, "What the hell's he doing in there?" At the end of the summer, we were preparing to move into our apartment, and I saw one of our RAs in the hallway. I noticed that Ictus's door was closed, so I asked Curtis, the RA, "What was that guy's deal? I heard there was some weird shit going on in his room." Curtis, a grizzled senior who'd seen it all, just shook his head and said, "I don't even have the words to describe what was going on in 803. Weaponized Gatorade? Hey there, fellow Redditors. Most of you probably don't know me. I'm Azirius, the same guy who submitted "My daughter is sick" an age and a half ago. I can't be asked to remember the password for my old account, which I rarely use anymore, so here I am with this new account. Today, I have another short tale to share with you, much less harrowing than my first. My memory is a bit hazy on exactly when it happened, though I believe it took place somewhere around my second year of university. I was a 20-something male at the time, of average height and build, not exactly an Adonis, nor particularly imposing. To be honest, I was a bit of a timid bookworm. I traveled downtown to meet a friend I'd met online, a young lady I found to be positively fascinating in our conversations. We were to meet around 2 p.m. out front of City Hall. I showed up a little early, plopped myself down on a bench, and pulled out a book. That's when I first noticed him staring at me. At any other time, I might have been rather unnerved. He wasn't exactly a pleasant-looking chap. Again, my memory is hazy, but I seem to recall he resembled something like the filthy, aged love child of Grizzly Adams and a Yeti. He was clad in stained jeans and a ragged coat, and clenched the neck of a half-full Gatorade bottle in one white-knuckled hand. Occasionally, he muttered something unintelligible under his breath. Also, he had a neckbeard. So, I have no idea what his name was, so I'll just refer to him as Beard after this defining feature. But we're getting a bit off track. I didn't think much of Beard when I first saw him, and went back to my book. It was broad daylight after all. The streets around me were filled with people. What could possibly go wrong? Hey, I never said I had a great deal of common sense. After a short while, I got the feeling that I was being watched. A creeping, unpleasant sensation, like 100 fingers running up my spine. I turned, and there was Beard standing directly behind the bench. His lips were curled back into an expression of pure fury, and he held the Gatorade bottle aloft over his shoulder as though it were a battle axe, ready to be brought down on my head. His wild eyes were fixed directly on my book. I sprang to my feet, extremely shaken at this point. "What?" I mumbled, my throat dry. "Can I help you with something?" Beard paused and lowered the Gatorade bottle as though confused by my attempt at communication. After staring at me for a moment longer, he turned and stalked off, still muttering to himself. I never saw him again. Cashier encounters. I'm on an educational leave while at college, but outside of college, I work at a certain popular supermarket with a bullseye as its logo. It's fine to get extra cash, but the longer hour kills me, and a couple times I've met some pretty disgusting people. An older man, maybe in his 40s or 50s, came into my lane one day with a woman who might have been his daughter since she seemed maybe in her late 20s. Keep in mind, I'm 18, but I look far younger. On my 18th birthday even, I went to the bank and the woman asked if I wanted a lollipop and wondered why I found it funny. She thought I was a kid. He began hitting on me immediately, talking about what you're doing after this and, so your name sounds really pretty. He kept insisting. I let him take me out into a free lunch during my break, and when his supposed daughter made a comment about him not being the sexy man he thinks he is, and much of an old man he is, he waves her off and asks me how old my dad is, to try and prove he's still young. I was uncomfortable, and mostly just mumbled answers as I rang up his things, and thankfully I never dealt with him afterwards. However, a few weeks after that, while I was on break, a bunch of other female cashiers talked about an older guy who was hitting on them, giving them his phone number and such. I chimed in about this encounter, and one of the girls explained that he gave her a sort of business card with a name and phone number, even if it wasn't a business specifically. So she looked him up. He was apparently a registered sex offender. Number 2. The stereotypical neckbeard guy came into my lane one day, and I rang up all his stuff while looking at his shirt, thinking it was cool. It was faded and seemed to be from some anime con or something like that. I'm a bit of a nerd, so I thought it was interesting. Looking back, I assume he must have thought I was flirting, because between looking at his shirt and ringing things up, I would feel his eyes on me and smile politely like a cashier should. Suddenly he told me, "Oh, I forgot something, I'll be right back," and hurried off. I rang up the rest of his things and set it aside, so I could continue ringing up other customers. 30 minutes later, he came back, smiling at me. He had a really disturbing smile that kind of reminds me of people who lick their lips too much, making it splotchy red, and set down on the belt 2 things, hand sanitizer and lube. I was incredibly disturbed. What else would that insinuate when the other things he bought were just normal foods? And considering how much he kept smiling freakishly at me, I have a feeling he was insinuating exactly what I thought he was. I met some kind of crazy animal murderer in the Boundary Waters. I live in Minnesota, and the story takes place back when I was 16 years old. Once every year, usually during spring breaks, our family either went to Florida or up to the North Woods for vacation. This happened when we were up north in the Boundary Waters, at a lake a little ways up from the Grand Marais, known as Lake Clearwater. It was a beautiful place, and we had stayed up there at least 3 times in the past. I think it would be pretty important to say that I was a guy who craved exploring, and as corny as it sounds, adventure. The Boundary Waters were one of the few places that I could freely explore. What with civilization constantly preventing me from discovering new places, I basically did nothing but use my computer while I was at home, so my parents were more than happy to see me get some fresh air by exploring up there on my own. The lodge at Clearwater allowed us to use their canoes with a license, and I often used them to go fishing on the lake or dock on different places and venture off into the forest in search of unexplored territory. I often took some food, a knife, bug spray, and my phone along in order to take pictures. During one of my solo expeditions, I docked in some bay just near these huge palisades that border the lake. People often went on trips to reach the summit of the first one, and our family had done that as well at that point. Keep in mind that there's no cell reception up there, and I was miles away from the cabin we were staying at the time. This had never really discouraged me from doing my trips, however. since it added to the whole lone survivor thing I loved so much. I docked my canoe in a little bay and found it rather easy to pull it onto the shore after that. I made sure to hide it as well, so that other canoers or boaters wouldn't be able to steal it. After this, I sprayed the bug spray, since mosquitoes would have aptly named the Minnesota state bird, and set off into the forest, making sure to keep track of where I was going, so I would be able to make it back to shore. The main reason that I usually never went too far into the forest was because I could lose that canoe on the shoreline. For the first hour of searching, it went pretty standard. I still got bitten by mosquitoes a few times, collected some plants I had read were edible in a plastic bag, and saw a whole lot of squirrels and a few other forest creatures. A little while after this hour, I remember coming into this clearing to find a large tent set up there. There was also a fire pit right in front of it as well, with beer bottles and empty shotgun shells inside. Now, the tent itself looked hardly like a new one, with tears and dirt all over it. After seeing the shotgun shells in the fire pit, I became a little worried. But I thought it was just some hunter there who wouldn't mean any harm. Besides, I would move on in just a few minutes anyways. Half of the front flap of the tent had been torn out, revealing the innards of the thing if I were to look, and I did. Nobody was inside, but I quickly became filled with fear upon seeing the bodies of animals inside. They smelled as if they had been killed a good week ago, and looked hardly better. At a first glance, one could probably rationalize this is just what the hunter had managed to catch, but they were all rabbits and squirrels and other small game that nobody honestly hunted. Every one of them had their necks cut open by some kind of knife, at least the ones that I had seen anyways. He didn't even bother to clean up the blood that had pooled onto the bottom of the tent, which had dried and become a brownish color. There was a cooler in the corner of the tent as well, in addition to 3 bloody knives in a miniature pile besides the corpses. The sleeping bag was to the side of these bodies, which made me question how this guy could possibly stand sleeping beside that stench. The whole place smelled of alcohol and smoke, besides the aforementioned rot. For a long time I just sat and stared, trying to formulate what to do in my head. It seemed like hours before I tore myself away and walked backwards a little bit. Now I wish this was where my story ended, but as soon as I backed away from the tent, I could see somebody standing a ways off towards the entrance to the clearing. He stood a ways over 6 feet tall and was wearing torn and extremely dirty cargo pants and a crappy jacket. Besides this, he had an unkempt bushy neckbeard and a similar greasy hair. He looked like a homeless hick if I were to describe him, the very image of a serial killer or something of the sort. I'm forever grateful that he didn't have his shotgun with him, but in his right hand held a jagged knife with a fresh bloodstain on it, and in his other, a squirrel with a horribly beaten face that was still weakly struggling. He stared at me for a while through these horrible, dull eyes. I apologized for being there, shakily backing away as this guy kept staring at me. Just as I was about to get out of the clearing, his eyes widened, and his face contorts into this angry scowl. He just started to randomly scream at me at the top of his lungs, and I assure you that this was the single scariest experience I had ever had thanks to that last part. He didn't even move when I saw him last, and as I was running away faster than I ever ran in my life, I could still hear him for a while afterward. I don't know whether this guy was just trying to scare me off, or was legitimately insane, but I didn't tell the story to my parents since they never would have let me go on trips anymore if I did. Needless to say, I kept my expeditions far away from that part of the lake from that point on. So, insane animal murder, camping in the north woods of Minnesota. Let's not meet again. The Heel Sucker. Longtime lurker, first-time poster to Let's Not Meet. Seeing so many people share their stories has also inspired me to come forth with a tale of my own. First, a little scene setting, and bear with me because this intro's a bit long. It was the start of summer 2011, and I was in the middle of working towards my associate's degree. I was poor and going to community college at the time, taking summer classes to get my degree faster. Not even 2 weeks into the course, I was already swamped with homework and eager to get this damn organic chemistry course over with, because it was a mess the first time I tried. I ended up dropping the course when I took it in the fall, and waited until the summer to take it over. It didn't help that where I live, the summers get very hot and humid fast due to the lake effect weather, and the college I attended didn't have a very good AC either because of the building's age. To save money and because I didn't have my own car yet, I took the bus to and from my classes. Now, doing this was a bit of an involved trip. I lived in the suburbs nearby and ended up taking a bus from the pretty safe suburbs to the main station downtown, where I would wait 15 to 20 minutes for my next bus, and then taking that bus over to the college. The whole trip took about 45 minutes to an hour, give or take, since the bus terminal was always packed solid. My book bag slung over one shoulder, and my backpack on my back. I was kind of dwarfed. I'm not a large woman, and at the time, I weighed maybe 115 pounds, standing a grand total height of about 5'3". I'm also pretty quiet most of the time, even though I have a pretty loud voice and can turn on the waterworks if I want to, owing to being in high school theater for 4 years. I look sort of like an unassuming, confused, glasses-wearing high schooler trying to attend college with the big kids and was often mistaken for one. And I think a lot of people realize this because I always had people trying to be extra nice or help me do things, and usually, if I felt okay with it, I let them help. I met a lot of really nice, great people on the buses and had some interesting conversations with many of them. Even some of the homeless people near the bus station were pretty nice folks, and I always felt bad they were down on their luck. I was also raised by a mother who unfortunately had dealt with very sketchy types before and didn't get out unscathed. She had been raped as a teen and was always extra paranoid about me being out alone as her eldest daughter. She would always tell me to trust my instincts, that they never steer me wrong, and that if I ever tried to run for it, I should scream and make a big scene to draw for attention. In retrospect, I am glad she did so, because even though I always felt safe downtown, I knew that bad things could happen to good people for no reason. So, back to the start of my summer 2011 Orgo-Chem class. I had successfully completed the first half of my trip downtown and was waiting inside the main station where it was much cooler. The weather had to have been around 80 degrees or so Fahrenheit for the non-USA folks reading, so I was dressed in some torn-up capri shorts I doodled on in high school, some nice open-toed sandals and a tank top, fairly casual wear. The bus terminal had these two areas of metal benches situated towards large windows on either side of the ticket booths, so you could watch the buses coming and going, and there was an attached Greyhound station towards the back, past the bathrooms and food court area. There were plenty of people and security about, so I didn't think too much of asking the security guards to keep an eye on my backpack for me while I used the restroom. I also didn't think much of it when a nicely dressed businesswoman in open-toed pumps looked very hurried, brushed past me on the way there in a way that bordered on rude. It was like she was trying to get out of the area quickly, but she looked really busy, and I figured she was about to be late, and just didn't notice me there, so I didn't bother asking. Maybe I should have. It could have saved me some grief later. I went into the restroom, did my business, washed my hands, and left. You know that feeling that everyone keeps telling you in these stories? The feeling like a cold prickle on the back of your neck, like someone's staring at you? I got that feeling coming out of the restroom, but looking around, I couldn't really pinpoint who exactly was staring me down. It was a busy terminal after all, and the Greyhound section of the station was particularly busy. After looking about for a bit, moving around, I noticed a dude in a red polo shirt for some local grocery chain and a ball cap to match. He was scrawny and looked a bit tweaky, dark-skinned, with curly graying hair, yellow eyes with dark irises, a straggly 5 o'clock shadow of a beard. It was kind of like a neckbeard, and the most hideous teeth I'd ever seen. Literally, this man's mouth breathed decay and gross looking at it. Normally none of that would have bothered me, Plenty of the local homeless looked scruffy and nasty too, but they were always generally nice people. But something about this guy really set me off. He seemed to be looking at me too, really odd, but every so often his eyes would flick towards someone else, like he was trying not to be noticed. I got that gut feeling something wasn't right about him, and turned to go back to my seat. Unfortunately, at this exact moment, the guy apparently noticed me and started to come towards me, right as I was turning around. Freaked, I quickened my pace and moved towards the crowd, weaving and hoping to have gone lost. I just did not want to be alone with this weirdo, thanks, and I didn't like that he'd honed in on me like that. Once I was sure I lost him, I thanked the security guard at my old seat, grabbed my stuff casually, and moved to the further up section of seats closer to the windows. I sat down, relaxed, and tried to remain calm. My bus wasn't due for another 10 minutes or so. Cue the weirdo sitting down on the same bench as me. Immediately red flags went up and I felt a chill hit me. Why the hell was this random guy following me? What did he want? Well, my mama didn't raise no fool of a daughter, and I always had good success in calling people out in a crowd to embarrass them. So I looked up and gave this freak as best of a death glare as I could muster. "Can I help you?" I said, making my contempt obvious as the guy continued to stare. I just want to sit here." The guy had a speech impediment of some sort, and didn't sound like he could even speak right through his dentist's nightmare of a mouth. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" I challenged. "I noticed you were looking at me, and I thought maybe you knew me somehow." He fell silent for a bit, and feeling silly, thinking maybe he was socially awkward or autistic or something, I let it drop. He kept staring off and on, but then said something that absolutely weirded me out. You have beautiful feet." "Okay, dude, whatever you say." I gave him a confused but polite thank you, figuring he was just some weird foot fetishist that was a little more open than most. Sure, a foot fetishist complimenting my feet was strange, but if he didn't try anything, I wasn't gonna make a fuss about it. I didn't respond after that until he brought up my feet again. "Thank you, I like my sandals too," I responded, feeling really awkward now. I moved to the next bench over, figuring he would get the hint once I gave him the cold shoulder, and began feigning working at my homework. He did not get the hint. In fact, he jumped over to be in the opposite bench facing me, and continued trying to speak to me. Can I touch your feet?" Okay, no, red flag, not going there. I felt a lump in my throat. This guy was clearly not just your standard foot fetish weirdo. He was staring at my feet the way a wolf stares at a piece of meat. And at this point, I was scared he might do more than touch my feet. Something along the lines of making human boots from them or something. He must have seen my speechlessness as a yes, because he leaned down and made for one of my feet as if to grab it. "There's my ride," I blurted, standing up and quickly getting out of his range so he couldn't pull me down or trip me. "Nice talking to you, gotta go, bye." I then made a break for the entrance, hoping to God he wouldn't follow, of course. My bus wasn't quite there yet. It had a few more minutes before it loaded, and I was hoping he didn't know that and would give up. He didn't give up, and instead gave chase. Because of course he fucking did. And I got so spooked I sped walked even more, weaving through crowds so he wouldn't nab me. The entrance wasn't far. It was right there, and there were security guards there. Surely they would notice and help, right? No such luck. I managed to get out of the area and into the loading platforms, speed walking towards the loading area, where I knew plenty of people were. I wasn't about to just let this guy get me alone anytime soon. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, closing in, and I broke into sick, cold sweats. Jesus fuck! This guy would not leave me be, would he? He was a predator, I was sure of that now. He wanted to get me vulnerable, and I wouldn't let him. He caught up and murmured something I wish I hadn't heard him say. "Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, please, excuse me. Can I talk next to your feet?" My mind went into overdrive, half panicked, as the guy kept perfect pace and time with my fast footsteps. There was not a security guard in sight, and the loading platform for my bus had a congregation of people. Think fast, and you'll be alright. Think fast. If he does anything, then he'll be noticed. "Walk?" I stammered, trying to throw him for a loop. "You want to walk next to my feet?" "I mean, I guess if you really want to." Yeah, stupid, I know, but I couldn't think straight. My stomach was in knots, and I figured if I brought him with me into an area with lots of people, I could find someone who looked tough or intimidating, or at least shame this guy into backing off. That was when the bus pulled into the station at last. Maybe I could convince the bus driver to let me on early. If I told him I was being followed and needed a safe place to hide, maybe they could get this creep off my tail. I slid into the crowd, and the guy followed suit, but much slower, as if hesitant. Sure, he'd back off now. I sat down on one of the concrete planters near another burly-looking passenger. Maybe the creep would think this man was my boyfriend or something like that, and wouldn't come nearer. No such luck. The creep saw me sat down, and then as soon as he got close, gestured to me to put my feet up. I was nervous and shook my head, and went to curl my feet under myself so he had no access. And that was when he made his move. In horrified, shocked silence, I watched this creepy fucker grab one of my ankles, take my sandal off, and then stick my heel in his mouth and start sucking on it sloppily. I wanted to vomit, I wanted to shriek, but for about 5 seconds I was paralyzed with disbelief and horror that any of this was actually happening to me right now. He kept sucking and sucking, and I kept telling myself to do something, kick him, scream, anything. Finally something clicked, and my mom's reminder to scream as loud as I possibly could came back full force to me. A wave of revulsion snapped me out of what this creature was doing to me, and I shrieked like a goddamn banshee. I made an incredibly loud noise of disgust and horror, something like a wailing noise, and I guess he wasn't expecting such a quiet, small, unassuming looking woman to be that loud or that vehement, because he dropped my foot and stumbled back several feet, frightened of the very inhumane noise I had just made. By this point, several people noticed and were looking in his very embarrassed direction. Have I yet mentioned that I swear like a sailor? Because I do. I'm pretty sure I called that fucker every manner of obscenity in the book, and then some. But I only distinctly in my panic remember screaming at him at the top of my lungs, "Get the fuck away from me, you creepy fuck!" Now everyone was looking at me, and the guy decided to cut ship and run for it. I must have looked pale and scared, because people immediately started asking if I was okay. The bus driver saw everything and let me on early to keep me safe, not letting the doors open for anyone else. She didn't even scan my card. There was also a nice, rather attractive guy helping me on the bus towards the back. The guy apparently was an ex-Marine, so I felt pretty safe with him, staying nearby me on the ride to the college. I was silent the entire way and terrified. My foot was still slick from that creep's disgusting slobber. Fortunately, I never saw the foot rapist again, and shortly after, Shaw stopped taking the bus and started boarding my mom's car out of fear for my safety. When I brought it up to my family and told my mother, she pretty much freaked out, contacted the place this guy worked at, which was cut from his work uniform anyways, and contacted the bus terminal to be on the lookout for him. She brought me some mace, and I carried it with me always. She contacted my uncle, who's a police lieutenant as well, and even had some officers dispatch me at the terminal, where I did take the bus. That fall, I took a self-defense course with this awesome old bat of a guy that taught me pressure points and joint lock holds. It was the best thing I ever did for myself, because it boosted my confidence considerably. I'm still friends with a batty old guy, Mr. Black Miyagi, as my family calls him, and every so often I see the same bus driver that helped me while I'm around downtown, and I always give them a little wave. I don't know what happened to the heel-sucking foot rapist again, and to my knowledge, he was never caught. Several years later, a friend did confirm to me that this guy basically thought of my foot like a vagina, and that his act with licking my foot was about the same as forcibly going down on me. My family and I call the creeper the foot pyre, after some random joke my little brother made to cheer me up about the situation. To this day, I still don't take the bus, and my family still jokes about this creepy fucker I told off, so ex-Marine and bus driver who helped me out, let's meet again and have a drink sometime. You the real MVPs, and the heel-sucking foot pyre, let's never ever ever meet, as long as I fucking live. Creepy festival dude. This is a drug post one-time encounter. Let's not meet again. Right, Rue. I've posted once before on the creepy theoretical. This dude was creepy. Also, this post involves discussion of drugs. If that's not your bag, downvote and move on. I'll read and regard your comments maybe, but I'm not too interested in hearing any judgment on me or my lifestyle. About me, I'm a fire spinner. I spin safely and I spin fans and rope dart. Google the videos, fire fan and fire rope dart. There are numerous examples and I'm pretty okay at that. I don't spin drunk, and depending on my high, I do spin high. I've been doing this for years and asked for more safeties when I've altered. I don't advocate spending high if you aren't a professional. I get paid to perform, and particularly, I'm not going to put a plug in. A guy I know just burmated his face and has life saved by a friend of mine during fire breathing. I do fire eating. I don't breathe fire. If you want to, that's okay, but please be safe. It is seriously dangerous. You cannot do fire bursts with naphtha. Onwards to the story. This goes down at a secret music festival on an island in Georgia Strait. This place is beautiful, and I sailed there, so I had a comfortable, safe, fecking place to stay with the people who sailed with me. Night 1 was amazing, so many good things. This festival is kind of like a family, and everyone knows each other. Most people are local to the islands, or come from the islands, and because all their friends are going, they make a trip out. There is fantastic music all night, a lagoon to pool around in, beautiful rocks and trees, and they bring in water. It's free, and no, I'm not telling you how to get there. I hope I don't sound terribly presumptuous thinking you would want to. And plentiful drugs. I'm a flowboy right now, in a terribly transitory period of my life. 27, female. I'm vaguely conventionally attractive in a very sweet way. I had glow hoops to illuminate my way and dance with, and also taught bunches of people how to blues dance in return for some MDMA for the first night. Rock on! I realize I have absolutely no money, and I would love to try mushrooms for the first time when I wake up in the morning. I'm an artist as well, a bit, decently. I set myself in a good view with a small sign, Portraits for Mushrooms, which had a wee mushroom drawn on it, and started drawing an abstract pattern that pleased me. People admired my art and my cleverness all morning, but no mushrooms. Old hippie bikerist dude sits next to me. Now, I'm smoking some pot as I go because, drawing, and that's just how I roll. And he's talking about how wonderful the festival is, admires my cleverness with my sign as I tell him my plan. And he goes on, "Oh, so do you need money? I might have $10 and that you get some mushrooms." I am outlandishly offering the pattern masterpiece I'm working on for $10. He kind of old and shambly, neckbeard and bushy gray hair tied back with a bandana, in a faded tie-dye shirt, shorts and flip-flops. He got that weathered West Coast hippie biker look. I can't describe it more really. In the same way our hippies seem to have some red on their necks, pink reds I call them. A lot of our bikers have some hippie to them. He shambles over to his fanny pack and gets out some change, $4.75, and he looks at the thing I'm working on, which isn't much, but is very detailed, a labor of love. And so I fish out another piece of work, a crayon drawing that I was fond of, and I give it to him with a smile, and he gives me the $4.75. Then he sits down. He's also drinking beer. He offers me some and I decline. I offer him some bong toke, and he proceeds to bogart my bong and calls a particularly creepy friend who was a bit more emphatic, and so this new guy realized I was feeling put out. Creepy hippie man did not. I did not refill my bong when he finishes it, and his creepy vibe, probably lonely friend goes away. Old hippie man gets to talking about how poor he is, and how he gives all his money away. He says he can't even pay his bills. There's like $450 a month, and that's how much he gives away every single month. I'm giving him weird face at this point, and it really creeps out by the way he's been staring at the numerous women walking by naked or nearly naked, as if he were psychic, in that creepy person way. He begins making comments about women wearing next to nothing. I've more or less blocked them out, but they were overwhelmingly sexist. And he's talking about the girl over there in the tent, talking to all the other people, when he spent the last $10 to buy her a necklace she liked, because she told him a sad story about her life, and he felt like he needed to give her a necklace, and so he gave his last $10 to her to make her happy, and she won't even talk to him, except the $4 I gave to you. He focused in on me intensely. I responded immediately and firmly in a cheerful voice, "Yes, and I gave you that piece of my artwork, but not the one you're working on." He responded bitterly, and went back to making comments about the sluts at the festivals. I got totally fed up, and told him I'd like him to leave, and he responds sharply and bitterly, "Oh, I bet you're one of them." And I huffed myself up, took my sign down, and moved to a different spot. I set up shop across the pitch, and almost immediately the most beautiful lady ever sat down, and offered me a delicious dark chocolate ginger mushroom chocolate piece of deliciousness that would get me righteously high. I chowed down and drew her one of the better pieces of art I've ever produced as the sun set and the moonrise happened. That night was absolutely fantastic. If there's a fantastic drug story subreddit anyone knows, please, I want the link to it. I was terrified that I would meet creepy biker dude during my trip, but I am a good damn galaxy-class starship, and I fly solo super well, and we did not meet. So, creepy hippie biker dude, let's not meet again next year. The Star-Spangled Banner. I worked the night shift in a 24-hour restaurant in a mid-sized city in Australia. I've been living in the city for maybe 6 years, working at this restaurant for 4. In that time, I've met a few of the weirdos that populate any city, especially since the asylums are closed down, same as in America. The crazies got pushed out onto the street. Heroes back in the late 90s, they're all mostly harmless. They just cigarettes, a conversation. I met one fellow I actually really liked. He said he was a failed artist. We had a few smokes on a bench while I was waiting for a bus, and he paraphrased his life story to me. He did abstracts, made a bit of money overseas, blew it out on a coke addiction, and lost his mind. Most of it was babbling, incoherent, but that was the story I got from it. He gave me a painting afterwards, a watercolor of a skull. I still have it. That was years ago, meeting that man. I don't really talk to the homeless or the crazies anymore like I used to. A few experiences soured me on it. The latest one is kind of the culmination of it all. I think sometimes that it's impossible that anything ever gets worse, really. It's cyclical, isn't it? Like things are bad, and then they're good. Even Gary, Indiana, which I grew up near, had a few good years before it went to hell. But it's hard to ignore, and maybe it's just me. But I felt like every day I'm living in constant dread. My house seems much darker at night than it used to. More sounds, creaking bangs, too mysterious to brush off. Anyways, this happened last week. Like I said, I've been working in the middle of the city at this restaurant for a few years. In addition to the street lunatics, I've met a lot of our neighbors, and they're about what you'd expect from the type of person that would populate a restaurant at 4 in the morning, every morning without fail. Myself included, I guess. There's the Eggman, who always orders 8 pouched with no brown on the edges, then dips them in the melted butter and shots it all down his throat. There's a fellow who thinks he's some kind of hacker, always wears little round John Lennon sunglasses and a trench coat no matter the weather. A woman with an eating disorder. He used to eat more food than I do all day, and she always came back, and she was never bigger. She stopped coming a while back though. I'd never seen the fellow with a keyboard before this night. Hopefully I never see him again. It was near 2 in the morning. I was by myself. Graveyard shifts all run on a skeleton crew, and I was changing the bin. To change the bin, you have to unlock a door up a flight of stairs and go down the stairs to the room where the empty bins are kept, then roll the full bin down an alleyway and the empty bin back up to put it underneath the trash chute. It's a ridiculously overcomplicated situation, but the reason this particular restaurant makes money is because they don't waste overhead on little things like this. I had a cigarette at the bottom of the alley before I rolled the empty bin up, and as I opened the door to roll it inside at the top, I hear music. I hear the Star-Spangled Banner, loud, and the instruments sounded strange, like music in an old video game. I look up and down the street, crew of drunks walking towards me, making me nervous as always. And at the other end, a man with giant Casio electronic keyboard under his arm. He was old, maybe 70, but robust, big arms. He was wearing stained shorts, a short sleeve bun up, that few buns, long white hair slicked back, a bit of a beard too, like a neckbeard. He was grinning and had an handlebar mustache that ended halfway down his mouth on one side and went down his neck on the other side. Now, I've never been to New York City, but I imagine you'd see people like this every day there. Not so creepy, right? It was strange to me because I'm from America, you see. I grew up in the States, moved to Australia when I was 13 for a few reasons I won't go into. And this is getting pretty long already, but I was unnerved, and boy, he was grinning ear to ear. He had shell-shock eyes. You could see them in the streetlight glare. He said, "Hey, mate!" Too loud, screamed it, and I hustled to the bin inside, slammed the door. I thought to myself, you're acting very strange. It's just a weird old man. And it's coincidence he's playing that song. It was probably just pre-programmed into the goddamn keyboard anyways. So I changed the bins over, and I'm rolling the full one out onto the street. Of course, he's right there. He says something to me, but I can't hear it over the boom of the music. What? I asked him, and he says the thing again, and I just grin and smile and start walking to the full bin down the alley. The music stops halfway down when I get to the bin room door and open it up, about to roll the full can in backwards. He's standing there. He's swaying a little, but he doesn't look drunk. He smells like cologne, still grinning. He hasn't blinked for a while. I couldn't think of what to say. He obviously expected something, so I say if I can help him. You're a Yank, eh? What? How could you tell? Ax him, mate! Of course, idiot. I take out my cigarettes, figuring if I gave him one maybe he'll leave, but he pushes past me. Now the bin room is connected to a basically defunct bar in the basement of the restaurant, complete with booths, and he sits in one before I really know what's happening. Maybe I should have said something by then, gotten a little confrontational with him, but I was exhausted, and my head hurt, and by my nature, I'm not really the type. I just walk in with the door still open behind me, still holding my cigarettes and lighter, and I say, "What are you doing? You can't." He hits a button, and the keyboard lights up. He puts it on the table, and it started playing the fucking Star-Spangled Banner again, and he's yelling over it, "You cunts really fucked up in Vietnam, eh? You cunts really fucked up, eh?" I don't. He starts hitting it with both hands. It didn't break, but the music broke up. He was wheezing, yelling obscenities. I ran, went upstairs. I told the girl working the floor what was happening, as much as I could tell her, as agitated as I was, and she followed me downstairs on the phone with the cops. You know already, of course. He was gone. There were some plastic chips from the keyboard, but that's it. The cops came by, seemed pissed that I wasted their time, which was understandable. I saw him one more time, a night or two ago, getting my car out of the garage across the street, level 6, far up. I look over the railing and he's there on the street, across the street, and he's looking up at me, or at the garage, I guess. He had his keyboard with him. He knows my face too, and that I'm American. I hope I don't see him again. Sorry for any issues with the tense in the story. I just read a novel by J. McLerney.